See it? Yeah, we are now recording. Good evening, one. Good evening, all. Welcome to Data Science and Technology Meetup. My name's Rob Huggins. I'm Client Services Director for MBN Solutions, and I thank you all, one and all, for joining us this evening. This is a virtual version of something that, as I mentioned earlier, began actually down in London, then has spent most of its time in Scotland and has been further afield as far as Berlin. We've been running this meetup for a number of years now, huge community. What we like to do is get together, talk about stuff that we find interesting, and more importantly, listen to some interesting speakers telling us about the things that they are doing. And I'm delighted this evening that we're joined by Rob and Matt. Rob and Matt are going to be talking us through some stuff that they've been doing recently all around targeted advertising, particularly use of cloud data. They both work for an organisation called Loop Horizon, but they will do their own intro later on. My job now is just basically to keep you guys primed here. First things first, as I've mentioned throughout, if you want to have a chat, if you want to talk to any of us, talk to each other, please keep chat in chat. The Q&A box is for questions. Now, Rob and Matt will be talking for around about half an hour this evening. If there's any specific question on any part of the presentation, pop it into Q&A. I'll go through all the questions at the end, field them to Rob and Matt. I've got a few questions of my own that I'll add in. We'll have a nice little Q&A session at the back. So half an hour for a presentation, another half an hour or so for questions. Should be out here sometime between 7 and 7:30. So with that, if you gentlemen are ready, I will now go dark. I will go mute. Rob, if you're happy, mate, time for you to take over.
Super. Rob, thanks.
All the very best, and I will see you. I'll stay in chat and Q&A, and I'll see you guys in about half an hour or so, okay?
Perfect. Thanks so much, Rob. And yeah, it's great that you guys are running these events during this period, right? Because yeah, I really miss getting our ideas tested by other people, and it's just it's great to be able to bring some people together and hopefully share some cool questions, and I think, yeah, just as Rob suggested, I'll kick off by maybe sharing a bit about where we've come from and the points of view we've got and why we've got them, and then Matt's going to show you some really interesting nuts and bolts that we put together, especially sort of stuff which, you know, we've been really lucky, I feel, during pandemic times with our client work, and they've kept us busy, and there's sort of something which turned from a side project into one of the most exciting things that we've done in the last 2 years. So we'll give you a Scoobies into that. Really excited to do that. But just to orientate ourselves, and for those of you who've not come across me or Loop Horizon or the rest of us, so Loop Horizon came about from the work that we did at Sky, and actually a period of time where I was actually working for James Alexander, who is my co-founder. He was my boss at Sky, and it was a period where the organization was going on really massive transformation around data and decisioning, and that was the biggest thing. Yeah, of course, like digital was a big factor, but it was really a transformation led by James, and parts by me and the rest of our team at Sky, where we said, hey, we've just got this incredible amount of customer data. Well, we've got this incredible amount of data, but it's rather frustrating. We're not using it, and but our customers aren't seeing. You know, they know that we've got this information, but they're not seeing the positive effects of it, of the fact that we have it and can use it. And yeah, so we ran a program that delivered over 100 million of bottom and top line value, which was amazing. And it was actually, I think Rob mentioned earlier about we've got someone joining us from Leeds, an amazing sort of tech hub, in the UK, and yes, many of you probably know, but Sky has 3 hubs in the UK. So London, West London, where it's more or less where I'm from. Leeds, where there's an incredible set of teams there building the future of telecommunications and TV, but also Livingston and around Edinburgh area. And I'm one of the idiots who didn't realize how long it takes to get the train from Leeds to Edinburgh. It actually takes longer to go from Leeds to Edinburgh than it does London to Edinburgh. And James and I were on the train, and we were about 3 years into this transformation. I said to him, look, what we're doing here is amazing, but this idea of using customer data, using data to inform better marketing, better advertising, we're having great results, but it's not exactly unique to this organization. And I would love to do similar things for others. And I'd like to launch a consultancy, and probably with a Brewdog or Beavertown or enough of that inside me from this very long train journey, and basically handed in my notice verbally to my boss, James, at the time. And he said, it's a great idea, but it'll be a disaster unless you've got someone who's decent at planning or managing, which those of you know me will know that that's, hopefully I've got some redeeming factors, but I'm not well known for those, and James is. And yeah, so over 2 years ago now, we founded Loop Horizon as a consultancy, and really, we just focus on cracking open customer data for use in marketing and advertising, and it's been an amazing ride. And the team that have joined us, we had a few people join us from our team at Sky, some real superstars, but also other people from other brands, and it's kind of this practitioner-led concept has been really big for us. So of course we're consultants now, but we're really everyone was previously client side, and I think that's been a really interesting element to us. And it's not a rule, but it's definitely brought about some really great features, especially when we get in the nuts and bolts of our clients, some of them who have huge amounts of data and are sort of big established organizations who have been around for in some cases decades, and all of the weird and wonderful legacy situations that they have going on, to other organizations which are similarly sort of big and old, but have completely failed to couple together, completely failed to organize and collect data, to newer organizations starting out who want to get it right first time. And we really talk about just drawing a direct line from having that customer intelligence, that customer data, through to being able to drive value out of it. And what I wanted to do, and sort of in hopefully it would just be like a short period, is give you some insight into what we think about this, and why we think it's important. Because it's not exactly controversial to think that data is important, right? And you have to go out of your way to find someone who thinks otherwise. But my frustration, our frustration, is that most of what we experience as consumers is not data driven, right? And we might hear from organizations, CEOs, CMOs talk quarter after quarter after quarter about how data is their biggest asset, how it's their strategic priority. Having worked in organizations and worked for organizations where that sort of thing is said, we like to take it upon ourselves to call BS on that quite a lot. It's obviously easy to say, but not necessarily sort of what it doesn't really get realized. And I'll do my best to justify that statement. As consumers, our experience, and I quite often use the example of retail banks, and say if I was to take NatWest, part of Royal Bank of Scotland, and I've been a current account customer there for 10 or 11 years, and log into their online banking and their app several times a week, probably as most people would, and at every point get bombarded with messaging about the fact that if I was to open a current account with NatWest, I would be eligible for £100 or whatever sweet treat it is they're offering to people who switch their current account right now. But of course, having been a customer of theirs for 10, 11 years, I'm not eligible for that. And all it does is remind me that, well, one, this is probably an industry standard offer, and I probably would get rewarded if I switched to someone else. And two, that despite all of that incredible data they've got and I give them, they don't feel the desire to use it, or even the responsibility to use it, which is frustrating, and goes quite contrary to the idea that them, and not to pick on them specifically, but many organizations, insurance, telco, retail, all huge banks of data, but fundamentally we are frustrated that it doesn't get used. And when we talk to marketeers, people who lead service parts of organizations, they're frustrated too, because it's not for lack of investment in data and technology that there hasn't been progress. As many of you are well aware, both the platforms, the people especially, and the time, like the overall resource cost that's been spent in collecting and managing data is massive. But we're barely at, we feel we're barely at the point in a curve where customer data particularly is able to stand up and say it's doing a decent job at driving value for organizations. And that's what frustrates us, because we see, of course, reporting is necessary. So the development of insight and data storytelling gets celebrated. The incredible sophistication and complexity of modeling and machine learning, of course, it gets celebrated. Unfortunately, most of the outputs of those things don't lead to commercial value directly, and that's something which we're quite passionate about calling out in our work with our clients. And one of the biggest areas of disappointment, again, is, he says with a smile on his face, but like disappointment is the relationship between marketing and data and technology. Because on both, and it shouldn't be sides of the fence, but let's face it, and I'd love to hear, later for those who are at the edge of experiencing other things, historically, it really has been two sides of the fence. And we know that in many cases, data and technology teams are well aware that serving the commercial needs of their organization is super important, but close to consistently fail to arrange themselves to meet business needs. And marketeers have been talking about being data-driven for longer than really should be acceptable, given the absolute low level of adoption of data-driven activities and customer data-driven activities specifically, and even more when we look at areas like paid media, for example. And it's such a pity, and that's where, again, sort of the disappointment for us actually tends to more optimism, I'm glad to say. I didn't want to leave you on what is in West London a very rainy, dark Thursday evening with a negative message. There are two, and we are seeing this with our clients at the moment, and you no doubt will be seeing it in both in your organizations, but of course in the media, two huge megatrends coming together. So Google and Apple with their Chrome and Safari browsers taking really huge steps in line with regulation, but also in line with their commercial strategies, taking huge steps to prohibit the use of third-party cookies, really taking out of the hands a tool for marketers. And on the other side, the massive rise of enterprise cloud as a platform for collecting, managing customer data, and it's inside that which we see cause for massive optimism for the use of customer data in advertising, because there has to be strong motivation. Well, it turns out there does need to be strong motivation for marketing and data and technology to get together. It hasn't been enough over the last 10, 15 years for it to seem like a good idea. Of course, I very often will compare it to like a vitamin. Of course, using data in marketing would make things better, but there've been so many alternatives. And in the case of digital advertising, so a whole host of those alternatives are being taken away, with third-party cookies going away, and the ability to retarget, to create interest groups based on user data, on data derived from third-party cookies is going away. And we see that alongside so many organizations adopting the likes of AWS, Google Cloud Platform, Microsoft Azure, and similar, in line with that huge investment, but actually suddenly building their customer data on platforms which are not just horizontally scalable, so having as much data hopefully well organized as possible, but also vertically scalable as so often gets referred to. So the ability to process that data in lightning quick times, and it's not just the likes of the digital native or data native organizations newer to the fray, but that gets us excited. It's more the 100-300-year-old bank, the national UK sort of insurer who's been in the market for 30-40 years, a telco who's gone from private equity hand to hand. It's organizations like that who are adopting cloud for the first time and finding that from a data capability perspective, they're within touching distance of the same capabilities as those data and digitally native organizations. And that's what, and it's those trends coming together, marketers needing customer data to fuel advertising, and suddenly data and technology teams being in possession of a data asset in a place where it can be purposed. That's where we have got incredibly excited. And as I mentioned before, it's where in the last 6-7 months there's just been a massive explosion. I would say it's been explosive in terms of what we've witnessed. The adoption of customer data to drive digital advertising, connecting that customer level, individual level customer record to DSPs, to ad servers, so that you can include, exclude, and make lookalikes. And I think at that point, it makes most sense for me to hand over to Matt, and hopefully we come back and talk about some of the probably relatively unacceptable things I've just been talking about.
For sure. Thanks, Rob. Good evening, everybody. First and foremost, it's a shame we can't be doing this with beers and pizza, but hopefully sometime in the future. I thought I'd just quickly give you guys a bit of background on myself. I started off agency side, so I was working for Publicis. Rob Huggins, your son will probably be interested. My client was EA Games, so working on the launches of FIFA and stuff like that. As you can imagine, very data driven, but predominantly third-party data. I then moved over to work in programmatic. So I worked for a DSP for a number of years, again, leveraging that third-party exchange data, which is completely driven by cookies. I then went publisher side, working for the largest B2B tech publication in the world. So some of you may have known it as Spice Works. Some of you may have known it as Ziff Davis. They've now combined. And interestingly there, I was publisher side. So I had the first party data, but we weren't really using it in an efficient way. So I've seen from multiple different angles the kind of story that Rob is telling. And I think, as Rob has talked about, with the looming death of the third-party cookie and the rise of cloud solutions allowing businesses to store their huge amounts of first-party data in the cloud, we've created a platform that basically allows companies to use that data so you can enhance your media and marketing performance. Rob, if you could go on to the next slide, please. Thank you very much. So our Audiences platform is a native cloud solution that helps to connect first-party data to advertising and marketing platforms at scale. So imagine your customer data is a unique competitive advantage for your advertising. It's a deterministic way of you reaching people that are relevant to your business. So only you will know if someone is a customer, when they last made a purchase with you, what it was, and when they're likely to buy again. By knowing that information and knowing what your best customers look like, this also empowers you to prospect lookalikes of those customers. So what our audience platform looks to do is to basically deploy within your enterprise's data environment. So if you're using Azure, if you're using AWS, if you're using GCP, our application enables the investment that you've already made in data to migrate to the cloud, to drive direct profit and loss benefit without you losing control of where your data is stored and having to move it from the cloud to somewhere else. Rob, if you could go on to the next slide, please. Thank you very much. So here is a visualization of how native cloud works. As I previously mentioned, the key part of using Audiences is that it is deployed into your existing tech stack. So it allows you to easily access your data and intelligence assets. Our audience platform has three main components, which we'll go through. So we have Audiences data. This gives you a curated selection of your data. So it's managed separately, it's for marketing use only, and it sits within your cloud data environment. We take a templated approach to enable a fast start, but then that flexibility to grow in sophistication over time. It allows you to utilize your customer intelligence from business-driven insight. There's also a centralized copy of up-to-date consent and contact fields, so it ensures that kind of compliance by design. The second step is Audiences Build. So the Audiences Builder is a front-end UI that enables marketing teams to query, build audiences, and schedule uploads without requiring that kind of technical know-how on the back end. So it's an intuitive interface that enables marketers to query data warehouses without requiring SQL knowledge, for example. A few key things to point out here is that it connects via a secure API to your existing data warehouse. It has list size updates in real time, so it provides you an indicator on that potential reach. And it gives you popular audience definitions, so you can copy and use them by other users of the tool can use them, so not duplicating work. The third part of our audience platform is the connector. So again, this is contained entirely in your platforms. Audiences inherits your security and your security standards, and your customer data never leaves your data environment. The functionality is separated, meaning that only hashed audience lists can be shared to whitelisted endpoints, never containing any identifying data points. The API integrations with all key advertising platforms are constantly updated and enhanced. So our platform continuously updates your lists as your customer data changes. There's also control and transparency from the data field to the uploaded audience. There's also comprehensive logging, alerts, and dashboards. So it's keeping all of your teams fully informed. And then the final step that we see on the far right-hand side is your marketing output. So that's activating standard campaign workflows. So be that through Google, through Facebook, or any DSPs that you may be using either in-house or with your advertising agency. So Rob, if you go on to the next slide, please. That's probably the most polite I've ever been to you, Rob. The thing that I wanted to show you guys next was a few different ways that leveraging that first party data in a usable way can add value for a client at the kind of end of this process. So the first one is maximizing that existing customer value. So for example, by upweighting bids to segments of customers, so existing customers using broad search terms, we know it's the right person. Let's make sure that we get them again. We were able to, for one of the largest insurers in the UK, increase their overall sales by 3%. So we know it's the right person. Let's make sure we keep targeting that high value client. The second was an increase in reach effectiveness. So through using this first party data to power the targeting that we're running, specifically on Facebook for this campaign, we were able to increase reach by 38% through taking high value customers and then running lookalikes. The really interesting thing here was when we run the targeting to those lookalikes, that lookalike segment was 49% more likely to convert than the standard base segment that we were using. And the third thing is around efficiency. So already by running this information, the first party data from your cloud, we're already having cost efficiencies there because we're not having to pay a third party to take our data and run it through maybe a DMP or a CDP. But there's also efficiencies to be made within the media spend. So for example, running a very simple suppression campaign, so suppressing all existing customers. Again, for a large travel organization, we were able to reduce the overall cost per acquisition on a campaign by 8%. And what's really interesting here is that there's so many different use cases for the use of first party data. And it's really exciting to see these teams immediately reap the benefits and continue to think of new ways and new campaigns that they can run to harness this approach essentially. And Rob, I guess I'll pass back over to you at that point.
Super. And perhaps I'll just pick up on two things and super keen to get into questions as well. Really, one is I just pick up on from an efficiency point of view. Yes, that's a benefit and a great one. But so many marketers that we work with and talk to are relatively fed up with the concept of performance marketing. They see it as it's focused on efficiency almost only. Like the posh word that people use for it would be reductive, right? It's trying to optimize an ever decreasing number, which is pretty sad. And marketers which sit at the sit across product and brand we're finding they've been data-driven marketing has become synonymous with performance marketing, and that's something which we look to break constantly, because as Matt was describing, that these customer data strategies are driving growth. So it's not about talking to fewer of the right people, and that is a good thing, obviously, if you want to do that, but it's about talking to more of the right people. So we find that really exciting. And the other is it's not about a new breed of exciting whiz kids. The marketing teams we're working with, they're the existing marketing teams in what are quite often quite traditional organizations, working with their existing agencies, and working with their existing data and technology teams, collaborating to do something which, frankly, in most cases, they never believed they'd be able to do, and they thought they'd just read about in campaign. It's just so exciting working alongside them. With that, Rob, I'll probably hand back to you, and let's field some of these questions.
Brilliant stuff. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Well, happy to say we do have a number of questions here. I'll kick things off here. First question in from Marlon, and it's a GDPR focused question. We've had quite a lot of this over the last kind of year or so, but Alan asks, does GDPR get in the way of using customer data and as such created a fear of using it? So for you guys from this end, is there a GDPR impact? What is the impact? How do you guys tackle that particular element?
So great question. And the answer is, for organizations, GDPR very often does get in the way. But let's deconstruct for a moment, get in the way. So does it mean that you should take consent? Well, you should collect consent, you should adhere to consent, and you should treat customers consent with respect, 100%, right? And I don't think, in those regulated markets, GDPR, CCPA in North America and similar in other parts of the world, great adoption largely and good behavior. In that way, it has quite rightly got in the way of using customers' data when customers don't want you to use their data. Just firm thumbs up from there in terms of evolved humanity and marketing there. But what it has created is the need for two things. So in order to then, for organizations to be able to use their data with confidence, one is to be able to create and maintain really great controls and processes around the collection and then sharing of consent. Matt mentioned how we often create and with audiences always create dedicated tables which ensure that consent is updated as frequently as the data is available, and so they're massive impact, really important to do those things which were not previously necessary. But the second part would be kind of it's an education, but an advocacy piece, probably more is the nicer word, largely with senior management and C-level. So the very large European bank that we've worked with, CMO and CEO, both very much aware of GDPR impact, feeling that there should be an impact, but actually they needed to be informed on to what extent it did and didn't restrict their use of customer data. And once they had a clear view of that, then they're able to give the green light to their teams to really go after the opportunities. And it's interesting, you just go those were sort of two conversations each, no more than 6 or 7 minutes long, which unlocked millions of euros of value. But unless you've ensured that you've got the agreement there, and that you've got a clear articulation of how you're using customer data, then you would definitely rightly smash into roadblocks. And so yeah.
So I'm going to take it in a slightly different direction here, and this second question is from an anonymous attendee. Hello, anonymous attendee, whoever you are. I have a great digital experience platform and need to now look at how to deliver traffic to sites that converts well. And the examples given here are display, search, social, etc. If you're a subscription business now looking at growth, what would be your approach to technology that can plug in nicely? What would be your top 3 jobs to be done? The top 3 priorities from a subscription business looking at growth.
Cool. And Matt, I might take the first shot at this, but I'm going to leave some space for you here, okay? Yeah, so exciting. Businesses building, from the ground up, in this era. And feel free to drop a comment in if this isn't the case. But I expect from the get-go, they've built their data and technology on the likes of AWS, Azure, or GCP. And what I would say to them is make sure that all they talk about approach to technology to plug in. I would say make sure that approach leans into that data and technology native approach that they've made. Don't be seduced by yes, some of the SaaS platforms which require you to move your data into somewhere else where apparently some magic happens before you can use it, because right in the heart of your organization, you actually have put data in the heart of your organization. Don't take the heart out. And so I would say make sure you continue that approach by bringing software and processes inside your four walls, and making sure that you don't have a brain drain or a data drain by all the awful things which happen when you have to push data in batches to other people's technology. And I think it's just incredibly exciting. Matt, what do you think?
Without knowing the size or where you're at in terms of the timeline of building out this digital experience platform, I think from a commercial perspective, if you're looking at driving subscriptions, you need to make sure your house is in order. So the really, really simple things, good functionality on the website, you're running your SEO, you know, the famous quote, the best place to hide a dead body is on the second page of Google, right? The sort of Google AdWords element to what you're doing, I think is really important. One of the questions I can see sort of further down is from Amanda about how do we differ from a DMP, and it's really important in whichever kind of space you're playing in, is that you identify the people that your target audience may think you're similar to, and what is your unique selling point. Because unless you have that clearly established, you sort of fall by the wayside with you know, the general noise of the innovation that happens in the space we exist in. So my small advice would be, you know, website, SEO, Google Ads, and then probably a more profound thing to look at would be a very clear USP that separates you from the pack.
I know obviously you've kind of drifted a wee bit ahead there, Matt, but I'm going to pull things back a bit, and I'm going to kind of come in from my angle, my perspective. Now, obviously, my angle is the people, the person angle, and I want you both to do a little bit of future gazing here, because if I look back over the last, say, 10 years, the skill set, the people skill set has changed. I think there's a more of a focus now on maybe commercialism within marketing, data-driven decisioning. Do you think the skill set will change again? Do you think that the areas that you've brought to the table this evening as discussion points, you know, the cookie area and the enterprise cloud area, do you think that will force a change in the people, the skill set required to be successful in this field? Can you see that evolving in the next few years to keep up with the changes in the environment and the landscape?
I think it's really good news here. But as I usually do, I'll start off with making it sound bad. I think we're deeply overweight with digital and technology skills. Luckily, organizations have the money to hire great people in great volumes, across data and technology. But those people so infrequently are purposed to do valuable things and things which actually drive commercial value for their organization. And the good thing, and when you listen to those individuals, and when we go to the job market, we've been lucky enough to be growing at a great pace. So we talk to a lot of people, and as I mentioned before, I think a lot of them we're interested in hiring quite often from people who are client side, like currently, and the incredibly talented people who are frustrated that their good work is not resulting in is not being adopted by their organization. So their ML models do not get deployed for use in cross-sell. Their segmentations and clusterings do not get used to develop new products or to inform to product marketing strategies. And the exciting thing I see is that all of that theory that has been built up through massive investment, both at a personal and like national level, to get people into universities to study all these sophisticated things. We're on the precipice of all of those exciting skills being used to make real change and not to make PowerPoint. And yeah, that's going to be good for the companies they work for. That's going to be good for the countries where those companies pay tax. That's a different subject. And it's going to be good for those individuals because most people, in my experience, want their work to be realized and to be able to walk out of their building that they work in, or well, maybe we don't work in buildings right now, but we usually look at their organization and go, look, I know how my work impacts. And so often in the area of data and data science specifically, it's just not the case. You know that you did good work, but the insurance company or the telco that you work for is plowing on doing the same old thing in the same old cycle they've been doing for a decade.
We've got a pretty detailed question from Mike here, so I'm going to take my time as I read through this one. So, scenario: a large organization provides automated online subject access request facilities for its users. Its users hit sky with subject access requests, about 5 million each year. Part of each request has the words, and I quote, "and all data provided to third parties." So Sky hit you with that many requests, and so do its users. How do you and other third-party data handlers handle this scenario when it can only be handled manually and you cannot rely on data entities and objects derived from original personal information? How do you handle so many right to be forgotten demands?
Such a great question, and a real headache for, as Mike puts, people who are data handlers, data processors, right? And it's two responses, and I hope I don't disappoint you, Mike. I won't speak on behalf of Sky because I don't work there anymore, and this is a really important thing. What I do know is there was massive investment ahead of the work coming in, so I know that there are significant policies in place and teams who work to fulfill those requests. And you're going to think it's a cop out for saying this, but the really exciting thing about our audiences platform is that it is not a data processor or a handler. That doesn't mean that we don't want responsibility or to be party to how our clients handle data. That is super important, which is why we built in things like the consent tables into what we do. But as Matt described, our application, so talking about how this impacts us, our application sits directly inside our client's infrastructure. So it's not actually processing anything. The cloud platform is doing the processing right there. Which should be great news, and it is great news because that means that those customers, their data is not leaving the shores of the company which they gave consent for it to go to, unless they gave permission to do so. And then when it is, that data is pushed out fully secure. Although security is a different topic. I know, Mike, you're asking specifically around privacy here. Fully sent out and logged so that paper trail is kept. So the organization who we work on behalf of have those records to be able to say, hey, look, on the 3rd of February, your hashed details were used in it as an include, exclude, or lookalike on this specific advertising DSP. We think that's super important.
The next question then was that question from Amanda. Matt, were you happy with the answer that you gave earlier on? Do you want to give any expansion? How does your audience platform differ from a DMP?
I think actually what Rob was literally just saying covers that really, really well. Amanda, I hope you don't think I'm being too simplistic with my description, but the real unique thing of what we're talking about is that if you are using a DMP and say, for example, your business has migrated all of your data from on-prem into AWS. If you were to use a DMP, you need to take that data again out of AWS and pipe it down into a DMP. Now, there's a few things that happen there. One is obviously an incursion of cost, because the DMP is working on a SaaS subscription. So say, if you're a large advertiser, they're going to be charging you millions for a year to host that data. The second thing is that once you've taken that customer data from your AWS, from your cloud, it's not updating. So immediately there's issues around latency, and as we've discussed before, with opt-ins, opt-outs for GDPR. So I think we're trying to handle a few different problems that arise from DMPs. One is the latency of data, and two is, if you work in the tech division of a business, you've paid millions to migrate to the cloud. It seems almost crazy that now, in order to use that data, you have to pay someone else to store it somewhere else that's also running from a cloud solution. Robert?
Yeah, I was going to say, I'd map back to the question about people and skills as well. Hey, look, if my job is Microsoft Azure or AWS principal architect for a bank or an insurer, I'll be damned if I'm going to do everything I can to make sure that I'm the one who's managing and using that data. And I'm not going to have some chaps in East Coast, West Coast, I don't care what coast, taking all the glory for using my incredible data in probably a pretty suboptimal way for marketing gain. And that's what's, again, it's a prize to be won for data technology and marketers today, is to do this within their own four walls. The prize is, yes, a performance, yes, a better privacy and security, but frankly, it's going to give people more rewarding jobs as well.
Very true, very true. Coming up on the hour here, we've got one more question in the Q&A box. If anybody does have any final questions for Rob and Matt, please feel free, fire them in Q&A. But we've got one here from Sarah, guys. Are lookalike audiences destined for doom with the demise of third-party data? How effective will this targeting be post-cookie?
Super. So, and Sarah, absolutely right. A lot of that, 99% probably of lookalike based audiences in the world have been built using third-party cookie data. Yeah, and that method, that's going to go away. Some smart things that Google are doing with that, where they've got to with their sandbox now. But that is going away. You're absolutely right. However, and for those of us who work in the world of data and technology, it's about our time is coming to shine, because that third-party data, let's be frank, you didn't know where it came from. All a bit weird. It was black box, and you didn't know how those lookalikes were being created, what data were being used to do it, and what algorithms were being used to create the lookalikes. The really exciting thing is that when you're using customer data, you're able to say, hey, look, whatever your definition of, say, a high value customer, and of course there are many, but let's say it's customers who transact more than 4 times in a month for a given company. You're able to say, hey, look, let's take that cohort, that segment of individuals. Let's use that as my seed list. So that's my first party data. Yeah. And let's use that anonymized as my seed list, and go to the likes of Facebook or Google as an example, and say, hey, look, this is my anonymized data of people who look like the people I want to target. And now you go, Facebook or Google, and do your damnedest to find people based on the data you have, which is not third party, because it's first part. That data is first party to Google or Facebook. You do your damnedest to target my advertising to the people who look like the first party data set I gave you, and in that way, and it's so cool that basically lookalikes are about to be done properly, in my view, for the first time, and secondly, that they're about to be done in a way which is fully compliant, more effective. I think it's really, really exciting time for lookalikes, in fact, and I think we've kind of mugged our ourselves off over the last 15, 20 years, using third-party data and letting advertising platforms tell us that, oh, don't worry, you keep your data, we've got a 360-degree view of your customer. Of course they haven't. And they're just finding very efficient ways to take media spend out of our hands. And suddenly, what a great time to shine, that first-party data seeding those lookalikes and holding everyone accountable.
Fantastic, brilliant answer, mate. That brings us to the end. We've got no more questions, and we are just about approaching the hour. So all that leaves for me to do is to thank you both, Rob, Matt. Thank you so much, lads. Thanks for the input. Thanks for the lessons. Thanks for everything tonight. Thank you to the audience. Thanks for spending your time with us this evening. Thanks for your participation. Thanks for your questions, and thank you for your interest. Rob Huggins out of here. Thank you all so very much. Stay safe. Hopefully see you again sometime. Good night.